For nearly 3 decades, Melinda Gates lived in the public eye beside one of the most powerful figures on the planet. She appeared composed in photographs, helped steer one of the world's largest charitable foundations, and raised 3 children under constant global attention. Then, in 2021, she made a decision few anticipated. She walked away. The divorce sent shockwaves far beyond Silicon Valley. The settlement alone reached an estimated $76 billion. Speculation followed instantly. Whispers circulated about Bill Gates' conduct, about private failures hidden behind a carefully managed public image. Through it all, Melinda said nothing. She chose silence. That silence lasted years. Then, in 2025, at the age of 61, she finally spoke publicly about what had driven her choice. She described a meeting that took place in 2013, one that left her physically unsettled. She spoke of deceptions that accumulated slowly, one after another, until they could no longer be ignored. And for the first time, she named the truth behind her departure. Her words reframed the story entirely, challenging what the public thought it understood about one of the most scrutinized marriages of the modern era. Long before that moment, before wealth, philanthropy, or headlines, Melinda and French began her life far from global attention. She was born on August 15, 1964, in Dallas, Texas, into a household defined by structure and curiosity. She was the second of 4 children, growing up in a family where expectations were clear and effort was non-negotiable. Her father worked as an aerospace engineer during the Apollo era, contributing to missions that sent astronauts beyond Earth's atmosphere. Precision, discipline, and problem-solving were part of his daily world. Her mother managed the home, creating a steady environment shaped by routine, warmth, and firm values. Their neighborhood reflected stability rather than excess. The family lived comfortably, but nothing was taken for granted. Melinda's father understood what it meant to plan for the future, especially with 4 children to support. In the late 1970s, he began investing in rental properties to ensure that college would be an option for all of them. What started as financial foresight soon became a shared responsibility. From an early age, Melinda was involved. By 10, she was holding paintbrushes on weekends, scrubbing floors, cleaning apartments, and learning basic repairs. The work was physical and repetitive, but it carried meaning. She began to understand how shared effort lightened individual burden. That lesson stayed with her. As the business expanded, so did her role. By 12, she was helping with simple bookkeeping, learning to balance numbers most children her age never encountered. Each task connected present work to future opportunity. Every cleaned apartment represented savings set aside for education. Every ledger reinforced the idea that careful planning created long-term possibilities. No one needed to lecture her about responsibility. She absorbed it through experience. Independence became familiar long before she had language for it, and that foundation quietly strengthened as she moved into adolescence. Around that time, something new entered the household. Her father brought home an Apple II computer, a machine released only a few years earlier, in 1977. It was unlike anything Melinda had seen. At 14, she began using it to organize rental records, but the experience quickly became something more. The blinking cursor captured her attention. She taught herself how to interact with it, typing commands repeatedly, experimenting until simple programs responded. At a time when very few girls were exposed to coding, she found the process strangely comforting. The computer did not respond to confidence or hesitation. It responded only to logic. That clarity appealed to her. She spent hours writing small programs to solve everyday problems in the family business. Slowly, she began to sense that technology could be a tool for understanding complexity, a way to bring order to chaos. That realization stayed with her. When she entered Ursuline Academy in 1978, her curiosity only deepened. The school demanded excellence, and she welcomed the challenge. She applied herself across all subjects, excelling particularly in mathematics and science. Teachers noticed her focus and seriousness. Ursuline was among the first schools in Texas to introduce computers into the classroom, and that decision proved pivotal. Computer science courses were both thrilling and intimidating. Each assignment pushed her further into a field she already felt drawn to. By the time she graduated in 1982 as valedictorian, she carried more than top academic honors. She carried confidence, quiet but firm, that technology would shape the future, and that she wanted to help shape it in return. Soon after, she took her first paid teaching job, tutoring younger students in math and programming. It was the early 1980s, and it was rare to see teenage girls teaching coding at all. For $5 an hour, she guided students through basic programming concepts, explaining lines of code step by step. The pay mattered, but the experience mattered more. She discovered that helping others understand complex ideas sharpened her own thinking. Each session strengthened her confidence, reinforcing her ability not just to learn, but to lead. When she arrived at Duke University in 1982, those lessons followed her. She entered lecture halls where she was often one of the few women studying computer science. The atmosphere felt different immediately. Many male students spoke quickly and confidently, calling out answers without hesitation. Compared to the supportive balance she had known in high school, the environment could feel overwhelming. In one early computer science course, the professor introduced a programming language she had never encountered before. For a brief moment, self-doubt surfaced, but it did not linger. She responded the way she always had, by working harder. She studied longer hours, adapted faster, and pushed through uncertainty. By 1986, she earned her bachelor's degree in computer science and economics. A year later, at just 23, she completed her MBA. Her time at Duke was demanding, but transformative. Years later, she would return as a university trustee, serving from 1996 to 2003. Those formative years taught her how to compete, how to adjust under pressure, and how to trust her own judgment. Her internships reinforced that growth. She spent 2 summers at IBM, gaining first-hand experience in large-scale technology development. She learned how massive teams collaborated, how complex software systems were built piece by piece, and how individual contributions fit into something larger. The work was intense, but she absorbed every detail. At a time when women were still rare in technical roles, she gained practical experience with multimedia tools, coding strategies, and collaborative problem-solving. Living simply in dorm rooms during those summers, she allowed herself to imagine where this rapidly expanding world of technology might lead her. By the end of her second internship, she stood at a turning point. IBM extended a job offer. It was the logical choice. The company was established, respected, and secure. The path ahead appeared clearly defined. But during her final interview, her hiring manager did something unexpected, something that would quietly redirect the course of her life. The manager encouraged her to look beyond IBM, to consider a young company called Microsoft, still small by industry standards but driven by outsized ambition. The suggestion caught her off guard. It unsettled her. Leaving a clear, stable path for an uncertain future in Seattle felt risky, even frightening. But she listened carefully. Comfort had never been her goal. Growth was. So in 1987, she declined IBM's offer and chose Microsoft. Years later, she would describe that moment as the single decision that reshaped her life. She arrived that August as a 23-year-old product manager, armed with a fresh MBA and a quiet resolve to build something that mattered. Microsoft at the time was expanding rapidly, and multimedia technology sat at the edge of what computers could do. That unfamiliar terrain became her proving ground. One of her earliest major projects was Cinemania, a CD-ROM movie guide released in 1992. It was unlike anything most consumers had experienced. Cinemania blended film clips, cast biographies, trivia, and interactive features into a single digital product. In its first year alone, it sold more than 200,000 copies. More importantly, it demonstrated that digital media could be informative, engaging, and accessible all at once. The project helped establish her credibility inside the company and confirmed her instincts about how people would interact with technology. Soon after, she led the creation of Encarta, launched in 1993. At the time, it became one of the most influential digital encyclopedias ever produced. Encarta combined text, photography, audio, and video into a unified experience that redefined how information could be consumed. By 1995, it had sold over 1 million copies. Families used it at home. Schools integrated it into classrooms. Computers around the world carried it. Melinda oversaw every stage of its development, from design and content to the way users navigated the software. Encarta showed her what carefully executed technology could achieve when it met real human needs. Alongside these successes, she managed a wide range of products, including Publisher, Money, Works, Microsoft Bob, and multimedia components of Word. Each presented its own challenges. Microsoft Bob proved to be the most difficult. Designed to make computers feel more welcoming through a virtual house interface, it arrived before hardware could properly support it. Performance issues followed, and the product was eventually discontinued. But the setback did not define her. Instead, it sharpened her. She absorbed the lessons, learning how timing, infrastructure, and user expectations could determine success or failure. Taking risks, she realized, was unavoidable if innovation was the goal. By the early 1990s, she had risen to general manager of information products, overseeing teams of more than 100 people. Under her leadership, Microsoft's multimedia division surged to nearly 90% market share. Her influence shaped software that entered millions of homes worldwide. Her reputation grew steadily, built on results rather than visibility. In 1996, she helped pioneer another bold idea, Expedia. At the time, booking travel online was far from mainstream. The concept relied on real-time flight pricing, digital reservations, and a user-friendly interface that trusted consumers to manage their own plans. The idea took hold quickly. By 1998, Expedia had generated $250 million in bookings. By 2002, revenues surpassed $590 million, and the company employed more than 400 people. Its rapid growth exceeded expectations, and her strategic guidance played a critical role in shaping its trajectory. These achievements unfolded during one of Microsoft's most turbulent eras. Throughout the 1990s, the company faced intense scrutiny as the U.S. Department of Justice pursued antitrust investigations. Legal pressure touched every division. Inside that environment, her teams focused relentlessly on product quality and user experience, maintaining momentum while the company navigated constant oversight. Despite the tension, Microsoft held its position as the world's leading software company. Behind the scenes, her personal life was changing as well. In 1987, she and Bill Gates began dating, though company rules required them to keep the relationship private. For 3 years, they built a partnership that was both personal and intellectual. On January 1, 1994, they married on the Hawaiian island of Lanai in a small ceremony attended by roughly 20 guests. She entered the marriage deliberately, negotiating a prenuptial agreement that affirmed her role as an equal partner. The decision reflected the same independence she had carried since childhood. Melinda French had joined Microsoft as someone who preferred solving problems over drawing attention. She began with modest assignments and quickly moved into increasingly complex roles. By 1994, she was general manager of information products, leading more than 1,700 people and shaping the consumer-facing software used daily by families around the world. At the same time, she was married to Microsoft's chief executive, already one of the most famous figures in technology. Inside the company, however, her identity remained defined by her work. She kept her badge, her office, and her responsibilities. Colleagues later recall that her promotions were earned in rooms where her last name carried no weight. Only deadlines, decisions, and results mattered. She remained in that demanding environment through her first pregnancy, continuing to lead teams as her personal life evolved. By 1996, at age 32, she faced another turning point. She could continue climbing inside one of the most competitive corporations in the world, or she could step away to focus on raising her children. She chose to leave. That decision closed a 9-year chapter in which she had helped shape Microsoft's consumer culture and opened a new phase of life, one that would gradually move her away from corporate leadership and toward philanthropy. Just before her departure, she helped guide one final major effort. Expedia, which had begun as an internal experiment, was becoming a real business. Richard Barton led the daily operations from Microsoft's Redmond campus, but Melinda was among the senior executives shaping its strategy, backing the belief that online travel would become mainstream. Microsoft invested heavily, then spun Expedia off as an independent public company in 1999. Freed to recruit talent, offer stock options, and move quickly, Expedia was positioned to grow on its own, marking the end of her Microsoft chapter and the beginning of something entirely different. Years later, by 2025, Expedia Group would stand as a global powerhouse, valued at roughly $19.39 billion. In 2024 alone, it generated $13.7 billion in revenue and processed more than $110 billion in gross bookings. What had once been a side experiment inside Microsoft had grown into one of the world's dominant travel platforms. Melinda's early conviction that people would one day plan their journeys online had proven correct, allowing Expedia to surge ahead of competitors like Travel Velocity and reshape an entire industry. Yet even as her professional success accelerated, life inside Microsoft was never comfortable. Looking back, Melinda described the culture as intense, confrontational, and relentlessly competitive. Meetings often felt more like battles than discussions. Early in her career, the environment nearly drove her away. The volume, the sharpness, the constant pressure, especially for women, could be exhausting. Still, she stayed. Her steady temperament, combined with deep technical competence, allowed her to move forward when others burned out. As her influence grew, she began to work quietly behind the scenes. She mentored women, recruited female talent, and demonstrated a leadership style rooted in collaboration rather than dominance. In a workplace many saw as overwhelmingly male-driven, she offered a different model, one built on listening, preparation, and long-term thinking. At the same time, she observed how power operated from the inside. She saw how influential men behaved, including Bill Gates' early attention towards certain female employees. That awareness lingered with her, creating an internal tension as she tried to reconcile her values with the reality she encountered each day. By the time she left Microsoft in 1996, the company's soaring stock price had already transformed her into an extraordinarily wealthy woman. Her options alone gave her financial freedom few people ever experience. She could have stepped away and lived quietly. Instead, she began redirecting that wealth towards something larger. Long before there was a formal structure, she and Bill started transferring billions of dollars in Microsoft shares into what would become the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. By the early 2000s, the couple had already donated approximately $20 billion, turning the foundation into the largest philanthropic organization of its kind. Even as her personal net worth remained in the tens of billions, estimated around $17.4 billion by 2025, her focus shifted decisively. Increasingly, her energy moved toward using wealth as a tool for systemic change. That commitment later found a distinct outlet in Pivotal Ventures, a firm she created to invest in initiatives supporting women, families, and social progress. The philanthropic journey did not begin with a single sweeping gesture. It unfolded gradually. In 1994, they launched the William H. Gates Foundation, initially a modest family effort focused on health and education. This was followed by the Gates Library Foundation and the Gates Learning Foundation. In August 1999, these separate entities were merged into one unified organization bearing both of their names. By the end of that year, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation launched with an endowment of roughly $17 billion, largely in Microsoft stock. In January 2000, Bill Gates added another $5 billion, raising the endowment to approximately $22 billion. At that scale, the foundation could do more than fund individual projects. It could influence entire systems. Even before widespread internet access became a reality, Melinda was already thinking about who would be excluded. In the mid-1990s, she and Microsoft supported an initiative called Libraries Online. Between 1995 and 1997, they contributed around $17 million in software and technical support to roughly 200 public libraries, bringing computers and internet access into community spaces open to everyone. Patty Stonecipher, who would later help lead the foundation, played a key role in managing this effort. By the year 2000, more than 10,000 libraries across the United States had received some form of assistance. For low-income families, students, and seniors, these public computers often became their first point of contact with the digital world. That experience helped cement one of the foundation's guiding beliefs, that access to technology functions as a form of basic infrastructure, shaping opportunity just as surely as roads or electricity. As the new century began, the foundation broadened its mission. It invested heavily in education, funding scholarships for minority students, and supporting reforms in the Pacific Northwest. By 1999 alone, more than $100 million had been awarded in education grants. Among the most symbolic contributions was a $10 million scholarship program at the University of Washington, created in honor of Bill's mother, Mary Gates. Compared to later initiatives, these were modest sums, but they revealed a clear pattern. Melinda viewed education as a powerful lever for change. The foundation funded new teaching approaches, professional development for educators, and experimental programs designed to lift students who had been left behind by traditional systems. Then came Africa. In the late 1990s, Melinda traveled through clinics and villages in countries such as Zambia and Tanzania. There, she encountered realities that no report or spreadsheet could fully convey. She saw families losing children to malaria and other preventable diseases. She watched mothers walk for hours to reach the most basic medical care. The experience altered her perspective. When she returned, she was convinced that global health had to become central to the Foundation's work. That conviction reshaped their priorities. The Foundation began funding large-scale vaccination efforts, maternal health initiatives, and family planning programs, particularly in regions with the highest child mortality rates. By the year 2000, they had already committed hundreds of millions of dollars to global health. Over time, those decisions would translate into millions of lives saved. Between 2000 and 2015, the Foundation expanded at an unprecedented scale. Starting with a major infusion of funds in 1999 and additional contributions in 2000, the endowment continued to grow through further stock transfers. A defining moment came in 2006, when Warren Buffett pledged $30 billion, dramatically accelerating the Foundation's reach. By 2015, the endowment exceeded $50 billion. During that 15-year period, the Foundation spent approximately $53.8 billion on global health, education, and development initiatives. Melinda chaired 5 major divisions within the organization and played a central role in shaping partnerships with governments, nonprofits, and international donors. The Foundation's approach, emphasizing data, measurable outcomes, and business-style accountability, set new standards within the philanthropic world. Scale, transparency, and long-term evaluation became hallmarks of its operations. One of the most visible examples of that impact emerged in the fight against polio. Working alongside the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, the Foundation helped vaccinate more than 100 million children across countries, including Pakistan and India, between 2000 and 2015. In Pakistan, annual polio cases dropped by more than 90% between 1994 and 2015, including an 80% decline in a single year, from 306 cases in 2014 to just 54 in 2015. In India, polio was officially declared eradicated in 2014. The Foundation invested hundreds of millions of dollars into vaccines, disease surveillance, and on-the-ground logistics that allowed health workers to reach remote regions and conflict zones. For countless families, this meant children who would never face paralysis from a disease once considered unstoppable. Throughout this expansion, Melinda ensured that women's health remained at the center of the mission, recognizing that when women are supported, entire communities are strengthened, and the effects ripple across generations. From 2009 through 2015, Melinda placed women's reproductive health at the center of her global agenda. During those years, she supported more than $1 billion worth of contraception programs across Africa and Asia. The impact was measurable. In Kenya, the share of married women using contraception rose from roughly 46% in 2009 to nearly 58% by 2015, surpassing government targets. Through initiatives such as the Urban Reproductive Health Initiative, the Foundation expanded access to modern contraceptive methods in underserved urban neighborhoods. Researchers later estimated that these efforts helped prevent approximately 80 million unintended pregnancies and reduced maternal deaths by more than 111,000 across Africa. At the same time, Melinda became more vocal at home. In the United States, she publicly advocated for paid family leave and workplace policies designed to help women remain employed without sacrificing their health or their families. Her work was increasingly visible, and it drew formal recognition. In 2016, she and Bill Gates received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama, the nation's highest civilian honor, acknowledging more than $36 billion in grants the Foundation had distributed since 2000. Around the same period, France awarded her the Legion of Honor for her contributions to global health and development. The awards were symbolic, but they reflected a deeper reality. The woman who had once quietly shipped software from a Microsoft cubicle was now recognized worldwide as one of the most influential figures in modern philanthropy. Even as her public profile expanded, Melinda was building something distinct from the Foundation. In 2015, she launched Pivotal Ventures, an investment and incubation firm focused on accelerating progress for women and girls. Through Pivotal, she backed projects in politics, mental health, caregiving, economic security, and women's representation in technology and media. By 2025, the firm had invested hundreds of millions of dollars into more than 150 organizations. These included startups like Papa, which connects college students with older adults in need of companionship and support, as well as broader efforts aimed at reshaping how the economy values caregiving and unpaid labor. Her philosophy was straightforward. When women gain access to resources and power, progress accelerates for everyone. While her public work continued to grow, her private life was becoming increasingly strained. In 2017, a woman employed at a bicycle shop partially owned by an entity linked to the Gates family accused Bill's longtime money manager, Michael Larson, of sexual harassment. Bill initially sought to resolve the matter quietly, but Melinda insisted on an external investigation conducted by an independent law firm. The woman ultimately signed a settlement agreement that included a non-disclosure clause. Still, Melinda remained unsettled. She pushed for a broader examination of the workplace culture at Cascade Investments, the private firm that managed Bill's fortune. Larson denied the allegations, but the incident added new pressure to a marriage that was already under stress. It also marked a turning point for Melinda. Where she had once absorbed conflict privately, she now demanded accountability. 2 years later, in 2019, scrutiny turned directly toward Bill himself. Microsoft's board launched an investigation after a female engineer alleged she had been involved in a long-term relationship with him that began in 2000, while he was still chairman of the company. Outside lawyers were hired, and Microsoft later confirmed that Bill had pursued a relationship with an employee. When he stepped down from the board in March 2020, the official explanation was a desire to focus on philanthropy. Privately, people close to the situation acknowledged that the investigation played a significant role. The revelations surfaced amid the height of the Me Too movement, further eroding the public image of the disciplined, methodical technologist. For Melinda, the episode intensified an already growing sense of emotional upheaval, where her marriage, her work, and her public identity had long been intertwined. Another source of deep pain stemmed from Bill's association with Jeffrey Epstein. In September 2013, Melinda accompanied Bill to Epstein's townhouse in New York. Later that same day, they attended a public service award ceremony at the Pierre Hotel. She would later say that the visit left her physically shaken. She described Epstein as evil personified and said she regretted ever stepping inside his home. When she learned that Bill continued to meet with Epstein even after that encounter, her anger was immediate and unmistakable. She told him directly that the relationship was a serious breach of trust. Bill would later acknowledge that meeting Epstein had been a profound mistake. But by then, the damage was already done. His continued association with a convicted sex offender became one of the deepest fractures in their marriage and a lasting source of fear and rage for Melinda. Through all of this, she tried to remain focused on her work. In April 2019, she published her book, The Moment of Lift, which drew on stories from her travels and argued that empowering women was the fastest way to strengthen families and societies. On the surface, the book read as a confident manifesto for equality. Behind the scenes, however, she was struggling. She experienced panic attacks, recurring nightmares, and a growing sense that the life she had built alongside her husband was no longer stable. Writing forced her to revisit years spent navigating male-dominated spaces and to confront how much of herself she had suppressed in order to support Bill and the foundation. Later that year, during a trip to New Mexico, the strain reached a breaking point. Friends would later describe an episode that felt like a waking nightmare, a psychological collapse that revealed how deeply the accumulated damage had taken hold. When she returned in late 2019, she began serious conversations about divorce. She and Bill separated privately as attorneys and advisors worked behind closed doors. Though the decision remained secret, she already understood that the marriage was ending. The public announcement came in May 2021 and stunned the world. After 27 years of marriage and 3 children, Bill and Melinda Gates stated that their relationship was irretrievably broken. Subsequent reporting revealed that Melinda had consulted divorce lawyers as early as October 2019, after renewed attention to Bill's meetings with Epstein. The settlement that followed would become one of the largest in history. Melinda is believed to have received assets valued at approximately $76 billion, placing the split among the most expensive divorces ever recorded. In August 2021, the divorce was finalized. Soon afterward, Melinda pledged $1 billion over 2 years toward women's health and empowerment, signaling that independence would only deepen her commitment to the causes she cared about most. In interviews, she began speaking more openly about the emotional toll of her marriage. She discussed Bill's infidelities, including the relationship with a Microsoft employee that prompted the board investigation, and how those betrayals manifested as panic attacks and vivid nightmares. She spoke of losing her sense of self for more than a decade while standing beside one of the most powerful men in the world and carrying the immense responsibility of the foundation. Therapy, she said, helped her slowly rebuild her identity and respond to what had happened without compromising her values. Her candor resonated with many women who recognized elements of their own experiences in her story. And in her reflections, one moment continued to stand apart. She repeatedly identified Bill's connection to Jeffrey Epstein as the turning point, the final rupture that made it impossible to continue. She had warned Bill early on. When he continued meeting with Jeffrey Epstein, even after the financier's death in 2019, it confirmed what she had already begun to fear. To Melinda, it was no longer a single lapse in judgment, but evidence that they did not share the same moral boundaries. She saw his willingness to remain connected to a known abuser as something she could not reconcile with her values. After the divorce, Bill publicly described the relationship with Epstein as a serious error in judgment. Melinda chose a different focus. She centered her energy on supporting survivors and pressing for accountability rather than defending explanations. In May 2024, another decisive break became official. Melinda stepped down from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, leaving Bill as its sole chair. For more than 2 decades, she had helped build, shape, and guide the institution that carried both of their names. Now she was leaving that shared platform behind. In doing so, she made clear that her future work would no longer be tied to a joint legacy. She committed to directing at least $1 billion over 2 years into initiatives focused on women and girls, explaining that stepping away would allow her to align her time, leadership, and resources more directly with her personal mission. Her departure prompted questions about the foundation's future and underscored a deeper reality. Very few women had ever held that level of influence in global philanthropy, and even fewer had chosen to walk away from it on their own terms. After the divorce, Melinda began offering small, deliberate glimpses into her new life. She spoke publicly about being in a happy relationship and about feeling more grounded and at peace. She increased her investments through pivotal ventures, backed new initiatives, and returned again and again to a central conviction that when women gain power, families strengthen, communities stabilize, and economies grow more resilient. Gradually, the narrative around her shifted. She was no longer defined primarily as the wife of a famous founder, but as a woman who had rebuilt herself after both a public reckoning and a private collapse. By the mid-2020s, her financial position remained vast, with an estimated net worth near $15.2 billion. A significant portion of that wealth was committed, directly or indirectly, to addressing systemic challenges facing women and girls. Through pivotal ventures alone, she had invested hundreds of millions of dollars into more than 150 organizations. These ranged from technology and finance companies to media projects and political efforts aimed at expanding women's representation and reshaping caregiving policy. Her influence also appeared in specific places around the world. In Pakistan, for example, the Gates Foundation helped finance a €55 million concessional loan in December 2023, including a €20 million principal buy-down supported by the foundation. The funding strengthened national health institutions and supported the country's polio eradication initiative. It helped train and pay female health workers, improved immunization systems, and advanced disease surveillance. The approach also inspired local programs modeled on her belief in women-centered investment, including fintech services designed to give women greater control over their finances. In 2025, Melinda's voice became more personal than ever. That April, she released a memoir titled The Next Day. In it, she reflected on her college years, her early career in technology, her time at Microsoft, motherhood, the loss of a close friend, and the slow unraveling of her marriage. She wrote candidly that the divorce was unavoidable because honesty and trust had eroded beyond repair. She described how intimacy becomes impossible when dishonesty sits at the center of a relationship. She detailed panic attacks, recurring nightmares, and the way therapy taught her to face betrayal without betraying herself. She also revealed that the separation had unfolded in private for more than a year before the public knew anything had changed. Around the same time, she appeared on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, speaking directly to millions of viewers. In that April 2025 interview, she said plainly that she had to leave the marriage because there was not enough honesty to sustain real trust. She explained how therapy helped her preserve her integrity through the process and confirmed that she was now in what she described as a pretty great relationship. Watching her speak, Audiences saw a woman who had lived inside one of the most visible partnerships in the world, and then made the decision to step away, rebuild, and define her life on her own terms.